Mark Carney met with Doug Ford and the rest of the country's premiers for the first time as Prime Minister today. They gathered to talk about improving internal trade in response to the ongoing trade wars with the U.S. and China and follow Carney's recent trips to Europe and Canada's far north. Of course, the meeting also comes just days before an expected election call. And Lorenda Reddekopp is over at Queen's Park for us. Lorenda, important meeting today for the country and also for Carney politically. Walk us through it.
That's for sure, Chris. So this is the first time, as you mentioned, that as Prime Minister, Mark Carney is meeting with Doug Ford and all of the other premiers across the country. There are a few premiers who are joining them virtually. One of them is Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta. And no surprise that there has been tension when it comes to her. She's been very protective of Alberta oil and gas, not wanting it to be caught up in this tariff fight. And she met with Carney earlier this week, and she came out with this list of demands for him. One of them wanting to ensure that Alberta Oil and Gas has access to this corridor all across the country. There was another demand, too, talking about wanting to end this ban on one-time plastics, on the single-use plastics. Premier Ford, on the other hand, we've really heard a tone from him of wanting everybody to be unified. And I should mention, he is the head of that group, this Council of the Federation, the premiers this year.
Isn't this great? We're in the war museum. So economic war we're facing right now as a country, but we're going to stay united. We're going to fight like we've never fought before to protect our sovereignty and our interests and our economy.
And so that was him just before that meeting was set to get underway. We were expecting we'd hear from the premiers afterwards already by now, but no surprise, perhaps, that it's going late. There are a lot of voices around that table. And one of the things he also talked about was the importance of ending these interprovincial trade barriers. And he said that that will be the first thing that his government is going to be raising in legislation when the legislature returns.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. An important meeting, no doubt. And there was also talk today, Lorenda, about an explosive Toronto Star story from yesterday that talked about a phone call Ford had with federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre earlier this week, of course, leading up to the federal election. What more can you tell us about that phone call?
That's right. So that's a story. It came out in the Toronto Star yesterday afternoon. It relied on sources, both federal and provincial Tory sources, it said. And it talked about this phone call. And I had heard that after Ford won his election, that he didn't get a congratulations from Pierre Poilievre after that. And the Star story, it talked about how that congratulations did come just earlier this week, Monday, when there was this phone call that happened. But Ford denied some of the details. Initially, that story came out and it said that Poilievre had asked him for help. A later edition of the story, it changed the wording slightly. It said that the ask was for advice. Here's more of what Ford had to say.
Yeah, he called me. I think whoever put that story out in the Star was totally inaccurate. He didn't ask me for support, didn't ask me to endorse him. He asked for advice, and like I've told everyone, tell the people of Canada how you're going to protect them, how you're going to protect your jobs, your families, your communities and businesses. I gave the same advice to Prime Minister Carney.
So it's interesting that he says that he asked for advice. And I've noticed that two of the moves that Pierre Poilievre has made just this week, they really seem to follow the things that Ford has been calling for. One, calling for access to the Ring of Fire, that area in northern Ontario that has all of those critical minerals, but is impossible to access at this point. Ford has wanted that sped up, and now we heard from Poilievre promising to do that if he becomes Prime Minister. And then when you look at the announcement just today from Pierre Poilievre, he was flanked by members of the union LaUna. That's one that has really strongly supported Doug Ford. Poilievre was also asked about this. Here's more with his response.
Well, the report is not accurate. I did speak to the Premier, as I do with all premiers whenever they want to talk, and we talk about bringing home jobs to Canada, supporting the Ring of Fire, cutting taxes, unleashing our production, and reversing the lost Liberal decade of the last 9 years.
So as for whether Ford could endorse anyone at all during this upcoming federal election, he says he won't be, and his office clarified that this is something he has never done when he's been sitting as Premier. He was also asked about whether his MPPs will, and said that he expects his MPPs to be very busy. This is very different from what we heard from the NDP leader, Marit Stiles, talking earlier this week about how some of her MPPs will be going out to support their federal cousins, she expects. But she is also not the Premier. She is the opposition leader. But the NDP Premier of Manitoba, he also said he will not be endorsing anyone in the federal race.
Okay, Lorenda Reddekopp wrapping it all together for us there at Queen's Park tonight. Thank you, Lorenda.